Thank you for watching the CEO Barbecue. My name is Antonio, and today I'm going to be looking for gold and copper in Serbia, together with Dr. Elena Clarici and Jake Garland, respectively, the CEO and the senior geo at Electrum Discovery. Before we get into the actual interview, though, I would like to warn you that we have received no monetary compensation for the production of this video from the company that's being interviewed. However, I do personally own shares of this company, so I am to be considered biased. Please understand that this channel is a business that sells content producing services to companies, which means you cannot rely on this video for research, and you should treat this as an advertisement. Instead, research is conducted on setterplus.ca and nowhere else. Please only watch this if you know what you're doing. This interview is intended only for experienced junior mining speculators because mineral exploration, development, and mining is a very tough business where failure is the norm and should be the expectation. This is going to be a conversation that is genuine and personal in nature, containing forward-looking statements. I am not a licensed financial advisor, so before continuing on, please talk to an investment advisor with a good long-term track record because your capital is at risk, and I am neither a licensed financial advisor nor do I have a good long-term track record. If you're not 100% sure you understand 100% of the disclaimers that were just showed on your screen, please go to the last section of this video and do not consume this content unless you fully understand and agree with everything said herein. That all said, Electrum is listed as ELY or ELY on the TSX Ventures Exchange, where over the last 3 months, an average of about 470,000 shares have traded daily. The stock's 52-week high is 18 cents and its 52-week low is 5 cents. With a market cap of 6 million Canadian dollars and roughly 100 million shares outstanding, today this is a 6 cents stock with a 50 and a 200-day moving averages, both at about 9 cents. There are close to 27 million warrants at 20 cents. They expire in January of 2026, and there's 36.5 million warrants expiring in October of 2027 with a strike price of 15 cents. So that's a total of just under 65 million warrants outstanding, and to my estimation, there are also about 10 million options outstanding, bringing the number of fully diluted shares to just over 170 million, meaning an increase of about 70% in shares outstanding can be expected if all dilutive securities get exercised, which would then also result in about a 40% ownership dilution if, that's always a big if, of course, but if those actually get exercised. The public float of those 100 million shares outstanding is about 72%, so call it 70%, whereas management and insiders own about 14%, with the rest resting in the hands of corporate and institutional investors, some of which you might recognize, including Fortuna Mining and a couple of institutions. Moving on to the financial statement, the latest of which shows us the numbers as of September 30, 2024. So do note that this is not very recent and look out for a new one closing off the fiscal 2024 sometime soon. But the asset side of the balance sheet at the time held $700,000 in current assets, most of which, 572,000 to be specific, was in the form of cash and cash equivalents, with some account receivables and prepaid expenses on top of that as well. The liabilities side had in total about $1.3 million on it, mostly in current liabilities and mostly in the form of account payables, as well as there's a $250,000 in the form of the current portion of the long-term debt, about $500,000 of which sits on the non-current liability side of the balance sheet as well. Again, this is as of September 30, but it is worth noting that after the reporting date, Electrum did issue shares at 8 cents per share to settle that $250,000 current portion of the debt. And they also completed a non-brokered financing, which brought them about $2.3 million in cash, of which after the current exploration program, which of course we'll talk about later on, I would guess there's somewhere between $750,000 and $1 million that are left. But again, that's just a guess that hopefully will become more clear later on. Moving on to the P&L for the 9 months that ended on September 30, Electrum recorded $1.2 million in G&A expenses, which included some non-cash costs in the form of share-based compensation and depreciations, leaving them about $1 million for the 9-month period, which is an average of $110,000 on a monthly basis. 35% of the administrative costs can be attributed to board management salaries and consultants, whereas about 17% or $166,000 was spent on marketing for that same period, with various other expenses like office and legal fees and accounting fees making up the rest of that expense. Exploration expenses here get capitalized, so you have to go to note 7 in the financials to get the overview, which shows us that they spent, or well, actually they recorded a $2 million exploration and evaluation expense. It was mostly focused on the Novo Tlamino project, but worth pointing out, the $1.5 million recorded here is actually not a cash cost. It's basically an accounting charge from the reverse takeover of the project, which again, you can read more about in the financials. When you take that out, the actual out of the pocket cost was about $400,000, mostly in the form of field work across the project. And specifically, Timok East saw the largest spend, which is where drilling took place after the reporting period of this financial statement. So normally I'd give you two ratios here, that being the exploration to administration ratio, and then also the drilling to marketing ratio. But again, that won't be possible at this stage. So I encourage you to go through their full financials yourself once they are available. And again, that should be soon. And look for those ratios. As also, I'm not infallible and I might be making mistakes in my reading or interpretation of these numbers. Their financials can and should, of course, be found on setterplus.ca. That all said, this is enough accounting for the next couple of days at least. So I'm moving on to their projects, of which the company has two. It's Timok East has been the focused so far. Timok East is in the eastern part of Serbia, so eastern Serbia on the Western Tethyan belt, and it's adjacent to a couple of big boys, really, Bor, Cukaru Peki, and Veliki Kriveli, which are owned and operated by Zijin Mining. Now, this project will be the focus of the discussion today, so I won't say much here, because then there's also Novo Tlamino, which is a more advanced project, or part of it is more advanced, and it's located in southern Serbia. This is essentially, at least for now, I think of it as a breccia lens, so it has 670,000 ounces inferred shallow breccia-hosted gold resource on it, and it's at about 2.9 grams per ton, although it has a higher grade core, as you can probably see on your screen right now. There's always much more to be said here, but I feel like I've listened to my own voice enough, again, at least for the next couple of days. So I'm shutting up now, and Elena and Jake, I'll give you the word. But first of all, thank you for sitting down with me today.
Well, Antonio, thank you for having us, and we're really honored and very happy to share our story with you and your subscribers and followers. We know each other for a while. You've been following us, and we're very grateful for that. And thank you again for this very, very thorough introduction. So, where do we start? I mean, shall we just introduce ourselves? Would you like to just hear a lot about us or the project immediately?
Since this is your first time on the CEO barbecue, officially, I guess we met at PDAC and I followed the story indeed for about a year now, I think. But we'll still have to go through a couple of obligatory questions. I call it the smell test. And we're going to start off with the CEO herself. Elena, who are you, and why do you think you're the right person for the job?
Well, thank you. So I normally start saying I'm a mining engineer, which is very true. I got my first mining degree from University of Belgrade, which obviously suggests that I'm Serbian. And then after that, I came to England, where I've been living for the last 35 years. I followed with a further education, master's and PhD, always mining, and then gradually moved into the finance side of mining, investment, done a variety of jobs, being a mining equity analyst, investment banker, corporate financier, and fund manager for quite a bit. So I do feel that certainly on the throughout my education and professional career, I did learn my ropes, quite extensively. I joined the City of London, and my first mining analyst job was in 1995. And in those days, we still had the Vancouver Stock Exchange, and that's where I started to really learn more about junior mining and the how do we build junior mining companies and junior exploration companies. Over the last 10 years, in addition to being investment professional, I increasingly started to take roles with corporates, initially just being on a board of different companies. Some of them which achieved quite a big re-rating. In particular, one of my highlights of my career, and where I'm very proud that I was part of, it's Aya Gold and Silver, which during the time I was there on the board, we moved from 140 million market cap to over $1 billion. So it's a very, very interesting journey. And then equally before I took a rope and took a helm at Electrum, I was interim CEO and a number of juniors. My tenure of being a CEO at the Electrum was really, I'm one of the founders, and this happened as a result of group of us, a group of investors, geologists, and myself. We felt that West Tethyan belt in general, and particularly that part that crosses, Serbia, Bosnia, Bulgaria, still has to deliver. It still has the potential to deliver a tier one deposits, and it's been hugely overlooked by the market, by investors, by the juniors, and that's how in 2021, May 2021 to be precise, a group of us, we founded a company with the view to build a portfolio of assets that will have a potential to deliver a new discovery in the region. After 2 years being a private company, in January 24 last year, just a year ago, we completed the acquisition of a publicly listed company on TSXV, Medgold Resources. Some of your followers probably know. And by doing that, we not only achieved our public listing in Canada, but we also acquired another asset. And in fact, not only acquired the asset, but we already had our own exploration ground around a barrier that we will touch later, this small resource. And we controlled additional ground. So by doing that, we actually consolidated that whole package, which now we control close to 500 square kilometers in exploration ground and this small resource. Does it give enough about me, or would you like something more?
Sure. Did you say Clarici doesn't sound like a terribly Serbian last name, though?
No, that's true. It's still my maiden name. It's not my
Okay.
married name. And that is because my father is Italian. So since you're very specific and precise, I'm half Serbian, half Italian. But I speak both languages, and I did complete quite a big part of my education in Serbia, including, as I said earlier, mining degree.
Da li razumete srpski?
Razumem srpski veoma dobro i pričam dobro.
So I essentially that's that's basically all my Serbian right there. And I'm just kidding. I was actually born in Bulgaria, so it's close to my mother tongue as well. But it's I was actually checking to see if it's a good idea when the CEO speaks the local language and everything. Jake, what about yourself? I mean, you don't sound nor look Serbian, nor does your name, so I wouldn't assume you are. What is your background?
Yep. So I'm based in the UK, grown up in the UK, with Canadian roots. I'm an exploration geologist, mainly field-based. So started my career up in Scandinavia, worked on some orogenic gold deposits up there for about a year or so. And then I moved across to South America, work in the epithermal and porphyry belts. So up in Mexico, down through Ecuador, Peru, and then quite a bit of time in Bolivia. I then spent a couple of years traveling around to different projects with another couple of geologists writing 43-101 reports, mainly focused on the field-based aspects of that. So yeah, I'm fairly young as geologists go in this industry, but I've seen a lot of rocks for my time, which is always a good thing. Across most deposit types, with a focus on epithermals and porphyries over the past sort of 4 years.
The team, the geological, the technical team that you've got now, is that do they mostly reside in country? Do they have specific experience for the task at hand? Have they worked in similar rocks before?
Yeah, so we've got a great team. We've got a split between Serbian geologists and then 2 expat geologists from the UK. Tom Sant, one of our other senior geologists and operations manager, has spent probably the best part of the past 15 years working directly in the Western Tethyan belt, so all through Turkey, in the Timok region, down in Greece for El Dorado. So he's got some really good sort of country-specific knowledge. Our Serbian geos then also have a really good split of knowledge. So Velko has been logging the core for all the porphyries in the Bor region, so working on Cukaru Peki, Bor, Veliki Krivel. So he's got very specific target knowledge for what we're looking to find. And then Igor, one of our other senior Serbian geos, worked for Dundee out on the western side during their early days. So he's also got some of the skarn knowledge and the sort of TMC boundary knowledge. And then we've just got another young expat geo from the UK who's got a very good geochemical background and very technical, picks up some of the newer technologies and really cracks into them. So we've got a very good spread of specific knowledge and sort of general knowledge to bring to the table.
I'm just noting down the skarn part of your answer there because that's something I'm hoping we can get into later on. Elena, have you personally or anybody of the rest of the team, board, or whoever been involved with an asset sale before, a successful exit, if you will?
Yes, I will at this point. I always touch on the board as well because we have quite a senior board, and some of the board members are the founders and the great believers in the region, and that's why we got to exist, if you wish. So we do have a spread of the skills on the board between the geologists, which is our Michael Thompson, who is one of the founders, and he retired as a head of international exploration. So he's your, sort of senior geologist who was involved in porphyries throughout his career. He worked with on Grasberg, he worked with Yanacocha, so he really knows his a porphyry evolution. Then we have Ralph Rushton, who we invited to join us from the Medgold. So he was already on the board of the Medgold when we acquired the Medgold, and he was happy to remain on the board, and we are very happy to have him. Ralph is currently CEO of Aftermath Silver, which, it's quite a good story with a lot of following and a lot of moves in the market. Eric Rasmussen is your career banker. He was 27 years with the EBRD. I believe he was involved in a number of different sales and acquisitions and privatization across the Eastern Europe and Russia. And then last but not the least, Michael Jones, who is your serial entrepreneur. I think the first company that he launched and listed was at the age of 19 when he was still at university. He was also behind the Mag Silver, West Siemens. I think that's the one that he sold. So certainly, Mike, if I'm to answer directly your question, any of us being involved in sales, I mean, of course, I was involved as an investment banker and Eric, but as a CEO or as a company manager or the board director, I think Michael Jones is probably the one who has most of that experience. Having said that, clearly between Eric and I, we worked on a number of transactions of that nature during our banking and investment banking days.
I was already kind of feeling behind, but now that I know that Michael started his first company when he was 19, it's kind of gotten worse. So it's time for reflecting here. But what is I want to talk about insider ownership as well. You said you were essentially the founder of, or one of the founders of Electrum. Insider ownership is now at 14%. Is that all founder shares? Did you guys participate in financings? How did that insider ownership come to be?
So that came through, all of the above, and it's not only management. This 14% includes also the vendor shares that we effectively issued as a company when we acquired a local company, which had an initial portfolio. So our current portfolio is a result of a number of acquisitions of different smaller companies in Serbia and some direct staking of the ground. So all of those, when we say management and insiders, that includes not just the shares that we subscribe to, not as the founders, but also in the later round. In particular, while it was a private company, we carried that company on our shoulders for about 2 years, and that was all done through private placements. But also, as I said, some of that portion is sitting with the initial founders or the owners of the company that we acquired.
Right. I also don't see any open market purchases anytime in the recent past from your SEDI filings. Why is that? Do you plan to be buying any shares in the open market this year if you're not in a blackout?
I do. I mean, I do buy. I have three vehicles. That is and yesterday we acquired some shares through Pan Pacific, which is one of the investment companies that we utilize, or I utilize, for the acquisition.
Right.
I think Ralph has been particularly active. He's been buying, so I can't speak on everybody's behalf, but certainly we do support the share
Right.
price.
Do you, and this is again still part of the smell test, so we're kind of running through these questions before we can get into the actual meat of it all, but do you or any of your Electrum colleagues own a royalty on any of these projects personally?
No.
Right. There are royalties in the project on Timok East, if I'm not mistaken, though.
No, there is no royalty on Timor. There is a royalty on Novo Tlamino.
That's right.
That sits with the Fortuna Silver, or as they're called, Fortuna Mining today. So that's 1% royalty on barrier on that deposit that we will discuss a little bit later.
That's right.
There is no royalty. There is beyond 100% all of our projects.
This might be a good point to tell me more about the history of the projects, actually, and we can start with the flagship, because I believe Timok East was owned by First Quantum up until 2020.
Yes. So again, not all of Timok East, which today covers 123 square kilometers and has 3 permits. 2 of them are continuous, Luka and Makovište, which is about 70 square kilometers, and then 1 permit, which is further north, which is called Bukova Glava. So we acquired, back in 22, we acquired a local company run by the local entrepreneurs and geos called Golden Age Resources, which was effectively some of the founders and the members of that company. They were former geologists of First Quantum. First Quantum had a period, very brief period, it was present in Serbia, and they had those licenses. So those and few other licenses across the country, which we also acquired by acquisition of Golden Age. The First Quantum people asked, well, why did they leave? They left the outbreak of COVID. It was primarily a corporate decision to streamline the portfolio in the darkness, or the first darkness of COVID. Well, nobody knew how the world is going to look like. And at the time, of course, their Panama presence and that part of the world for them was a flagship, and they really downscaled on a number of other countries, not just Serbia. Clearly, probably they're regretting their decision today, but anyway, that's down to them. So yes, there were 2 of those licenses within the Timok East, so Bukova Glava and Luka. They used to be owned by First Quantum, where they did really very, very modest, close to nothing exploration. We have all the database, we have all the historic that came with the acquisition. And it was a very regional reconnaissance, some soils, very limited soils. So there was nothing of the nature to suggest that they left the country because of the results. They were not there because they really didn't do much in the country. Subsequently, because they had a couple of results outside Luka, which were really high-grade copper. So we staked the 3rd permit in Timok East, which is called Makovište. And that's really where, because of that very same, very high-grade copper, that's when we started a more intense exploration in 2024. Post our listing, we went back to that very precise point, and the rest is history. That's how Bambino and the whole region, or whole locality for us developed. Ever since, this is not we haven't really announced it because we haven't fully got it, but we have we have applied for additional ground, primarily to close that gap between Bukova Glava and Luka, so that we really control then the whole land package along the Timok East, along the Timok magmatic complex. So yeah, so if we get all of this, that's obviously still in application and there is no certainty. We are fairly comfortable that we'll get some of those licenses or some of the ground. Our Timok East may jump to 300 square kilometers.
I like the names, by the way, of these projects. Book of Oglava is very close to something that my mom used to call me, which slightly translates to wooden head, and she's very right to do that. What is your why I'm asking this because I'm wondering about what's your view on the remaining discovery potential, if you will, in the western part of the Tethyan belt, though? Because I mean, the best are the best assets already snapped up by majors like Zijin and Dundee, and I guess, well, I guess you think that there is more discovery potential, but how could they have missed it given their, again, financial and geological capabilities?
Well, so I think we need to kind of start linking this conversation with some maps. So
Sure.
we are on the eastern edge or eastern boundary of what is called Timok magmatic complex. I will answer your question, although we don't have necessarily licenses and land position inside the Timok magmatic complex, but I'll still answer the question. We believe, not only us, but between us and Zijin and Dundee and all the new entrants, there is still a potential for a big discoveries. And I think the most recent announcement of Zijin, which is only a couple of weeks old, they just announced a new discovery, Malka Golaya, which is another copper gold discovery, and depends which classification you use, but we all know Zijin likes to report in contained metal. I think they reported 150 million tons at close to 2% copper and 0.6 grams per ton. So this is something that's been announced 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. So it just confirms that there is still a lot of potential, a lot of ground to be covered, and the potential for further discoveries. BHP, obviously, through their joint venture and earning with Mundoro, are of the same belief. And, clearly we can't speak about others, but we are fully aware of some other majors who are equally looking into the region. So that's just what is inside of TMC. Where we are, our licenses are mainly, we do have parts of our project that is inside TMC and directly on the border and inside TMC. But, quite a bit of the ground is outside, further east. And that's really where the full excitement starts for us. And you haven't mentioned it, but this year we have been awarded BHP. We are included in a 2025 BHP XPLOR accelerator program. And the reason why we are there is precisely for what you ask. So what is the potential of the region and outside the region? And we've been working within this program, and Jake will tell you a lot more in detail about it, but for the last 3 months, we've been solely and really exclusively working on answering that question. And BHP was very clear in their question. It's like, can you demonstrate the presence of or the continuation of the Cretaceous arc outside what is known TMC or Timok magmatic complex, and in particular, because we do know that there is existence of Timok of the Cretaceous arc in Bulgaria and further east. So there is this part that's been underexplored, or probably not even explored, because when we started our exploration, or before we even got into any of this, we really did a lot of research just to understand why these licenses were available and what is the potential. And one thing that we could never answer is there was none of the historic exploration from the previous state-run bodies and the juniors that were in the country post the sort of division of the former Yugoslavia.
Mm-hmm.
So we do believe that there is a huge potential, and that's what we are to prove and make a discovery.
I'll just jump in with a couple of points there as well from the geology side of things. So, historically, mining in Bor has been active since 1904. In around 2016, there was Cukaru Peki discovered less than 10 kilometers south from a region that's been mined for over 100 years. In the past year, there's been the discovery of Chokorakita and Malko Golaya within 30 kilometers of this same complex that's been mined for 100 years. when you look at the concession map, there's 5 operating porphyry mines within a 40 kilometer strike length, and there's no concessions east or west from the Zijin main mining complex at the minute. If you go to any other porphyry district in the world with that sort of prolific mining history, the concessions are staked over 3 times within 15 kilometers east and west of any known porphyry deposit. So it's a really underexplored region. All the historic focus has been directly on that trend, which is now coming to light with 2 big discoveries on the same trend just further south. So yeah, it's a very geologically complex region, which is where the opportunities lie for us, and also why these discoveries keep being made over 100 years after the initial mining started in the region. And I mean, when you jump over to Dundee as well, they've had their projects on the western margin of the TMC for, I think, since the early 2000s, and they're still making discoveries 20 years later on that same project, which just shows the prospectivity, but also the complex geological nature. But I mean, like I said, that's where all the opportunities lie, in these prolific zones that are complex. It just takes some figuring out and some good geological work to get to the bottom of it, which is why it's great being part of the XPLOR program, because they've given us a really clear path on how we sort of figure that out and the milestones that we need to complete to get to a stage where we're starting to make those solid foundations for discovery.
The money that you're getting from the XPLOR program from BHP, what is it that you can use it on? Is it strictly targeting and field work and stuff like that, or could you use it for drilling if you had to?
I'll start and then Jake can expand. So we got the US $500,000 as a non-dilutive grant as a part of the program. We do obviously agree with BHP the budget and how we're going to spend it. We still have quite a bit of say what we can do with the money. As they always say, we can't tell you what to do, but clearly it's in our interest to listen, because like last week when we had the BHP visiting the property, we had the 3 most senior geologists from the company like BHP who bothered to come to Serbia and spend a week with us and Mundoro to understand the region. So you do listen. It will be quite arrogant not to listen what they have to say. So having said that, we did agree on all the work together. They listened to us as well, because they do feel that we know maybe a little bit more about the region. And jointly we agreed the program, and we are now honoring and sort of working on that program. So the drilling hasn't been planned on the BHP dollar, partly because they really want to understand that eastern part and apply their own mineral systems and architecture before we start spending, before we start drilling. Having said that, doesn't stop us to drill. They always made it clear, because we understand our role and our desire as a publicly listed company to keep drilling, and there is no restriction on that. We most likely will continue using our own dollars or our own money that we raised back in September. If it comes back to that, we will be going soon into drilling, which we do plan to go back into drilling. Probably not until summer months, because the work we are doing now with them, it's very, very, it adds a lot of value. It adds a lot of understanding. It adds to our targeting. So that's why the most of the money from the BHP grant, which we're getting in tranches, it's spent on the on non-drilling activities.
How much money do you have left right now? As I mentioned at the beginning, I thought 750 to about $1 million. Is that about right?
Yep, that's spot on. Yeah, we're close to 800. Yeah,
800. Okay, good.
800,000. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about where you go from here, where you go next, because I mean you've drilled just over 700 meters so far. There is some gold and some silver and some copper in there, but nothing economical from a grade by width perspective, so to put it, and also maybe not necessarily what you would have hoped for. But thinking about the drill to kill approach here, does what you've drilled so far mean that the target is killed, or is there something else to be done here? And where do you go from here?
Oh, far from being killed. I mean, that cannot be further from the truth. I think the ever since we stopped drilling and we paused, it's kind of a semantic, it's the word you may choose. But really what we were seeing as we were drilling, it was so complex. And we were fearing if we just continue that, we'll burn all the cash without, real kind of, making that discovery. And sadly, not sadly, but the market has kind of gone ahead of us and made a lot of expectations without us even promising that the first one or two holes will be discovery holes. So it's not, these are first two holes ever drilled in that part of the region. So it's not only on our. So yes, of course, it's a little bit disappointing, but hey, give us a chance. We did further work, and we're continuing further work around Bambino, and we, far from abandoning Bambino and just looking around the property for other drill targets, we do have more targets around Bambino. So whether we'll go back exactly at Bambino and continue drilling, I don't know, probably not. Whether we'll be drilling very close to Bambino, yes, probably yes. And I think probably Jake is the best place to answer that, because a lot of that is evolving and a lot of that is becoming, kind of it's crystallizing every day, including last week that we were with BHP and, we discussed all of that with them. So
Well,
Jake,
Jake,
you might want to answer.
to Elena's point, Jake, if I told you I have a magic stick, I'll make your drilling free, but you got to put the drill there tomorrow. Where do you put it?
So that's a tricky question to answer, and what we're trying to think about right now. It's difficult without a map to show you, but I think in the latest news release that we've put out as well. So what we intercepted with the holes that we did drill, which obviously very limited, 700 meters, looked like the distal portions of a skarn. So we had garnets and pervasive chlorite epidote alteration. So the key there is essentially vectoring in onto the hotter part of the skarn where there's more sulfide minerals that have dropped out, which usually comes with more magnetite. So essentially, if you gave me a drill rig tomorrow, I would probably go west of Bambino and drill a deep hole there where we're getting closer to the heat source. So our AMT showed a direct pathway along a regional extension structure that dips in towards the TMC. And we're starting to pull together the ideas where the hydrothermal driver is. And obviously, the closer you get to that driver, the more likely you'll have higher grade skarn mineralization. We've also found this skarn trend all the way along Bambino, so connecting the northern anomaly up with Bambino. We've been doing some work there over the past month or so. It's identified more skarn targets along that trend. So it depends how many holes you're going to give me, really, would be my answer. But yeah, I mean, to the east, a deep hole, yeah, getting closer, vectoring in towards the main hydrothermal driver. We've also recently pulled together all the regional data that we could find, which had identified a really nice mag anomaly to the west of Bambino, which is actually inside the TMC and shares some geological and magnetic signatures with other porphyry deposits in the region. We're only about 2 kilometers east of Veliki Krivel there. So I would also probably stick a hole just to the east of Veliki Krivel, because that also has some great skarn potential. We're less than 1.4 kilometers from the pit at that point in Cretaceous limestones. Mm-hmm. So you can put those 2 points together, and that's another great target that we haven't even got round to looking at in detail yet. That's about 2 kilometers north of the mag anomaly and another potential target down the road. But essentially, we want to do a ground magnetic survey across the whole license with some tighter space lines across the mag anomaly and the potential skarn trend from Bambino up to the northern anomaly, which will hopefully give us some nice drill targets and answer that question with more certainty. But at the minute, I would drill a deep hole, east of Bambino, and then depends how many holes you're going to give me.
Well, to disappoint you there, I don't have that magic stick. If I did, I probably wouldn't be making videos for a living. And also, I like the way you think, though. Although I'm more of a cowboy than a geologist myself, I do like deep holes. And what you mentioning here, though, is interesting. The skarn part of it all. You mentioned it a couple of times, and that's is your thesis still that there is a porphyry here, though? Because the skarn part is new-ish to me. It was in that February update that you started talking about skarn mineralization. So is that changing your thesis now that you know and understand more about the region? Or look, what's really going on here?
So, I mean, skarns can come in two forms. So you can have skarns that are associated with underlying porphyries, which we have up at Medine, which is another big, close to billion-ton porphyry in the Timok trend right at the top, where everything joins up. So they had skarn mineralization associated with the porphyry. At Veliki Krivel, they also had skarn mineralization associated with the porphyry directly in the eastern part of the pit, which is interesting. And then you can also get skarns that are more distal skarns to a big hydrothermal source. So that's what you get on the western boundary over at Chokorakita that Dundee are drilling. And they also have some smaller porphyries associated with that. So answer to your question, skarns are typically associated with porphyries, but they can also form distal environments, but in themselves still be really good exploration targets, as Dundee are showing on the western side of the belt. So, yeah.
Well, you mentioned a couple of things about the mineralogy earlier, but is this prograde or retrograde that you've seen so far?
So that's what we're trying to figure out. It looks like we're distal, so retrograde, but we're doing some detailed TEMA studies with the Natural History Museum in London, which I've got the samples just straight back from the field a couple of days ago, which is going to answer some of those questions for us and which way to vector into the primary heat source. Because skarns are notoriously difficult to figure out. I mean, I've had a little bit of skarn experience in Mexico, but I'm not a skarn expert by any way. So the safest thing to do is get some solid petrology done. So TEMA, you essentially get a mineral map of what you give them with no room for error. So you can then directly correlate that with past studies on skarns and hopefully try and vector in to which direction we need to go in. Deeper, east, west.
But
which, we should get some good information from those studies.
But it's still, you're still thinking porphyry as opposed to CRD, for example.
Yes.
Okay.
Initially.
But what's then the internal thesis on the plumbing of that skarn, though? Because I assume you're thinking there's a feeder zone below it then in that case.
Yeah, so I mean, our AMT results naturally fed into that. So it shows a really nice westerly dipping structure, which could also represent sulfide mineralization and a deeper target in itself. But it essentially connects our whole region with the TMC. And we've been doing quite a lot of sort of deep dive into the literature of the region. And we've found some really nice papers that link our projects with a couple of, so Graben with an easterly bounding extensional fault that looks like it dips straight into the TMC and correlates with our Western mag target. Yeah.
How deep would that be? I mean, because if it's dipping, was dipping at like 45 degrees, so how deep would you expect it to be?
So I'd need to get the map up, and it depends really where the mineralization forms. So these extensional structures, they're the feeders and the host essentially for the mineralization. So it could form deep, really deep down, so 4 kilometers, or it could form a kilometer beneath surface. It's difficult to tell without a hole in it. And it's theorizing, yeah.
Yeah.
But
You
if
know,
I may jump in, I mean,
sure.
I think the whole world knows that we, not just us as Electrum, but everything that everybody else is doing, including Dundee and Zijin, it sees on a deeper side. So we are, in our own internal discussions, and we're talking kilometer plus. Yeah.
Right. I think and I could try to pull up that table actually be sure, but I think the mineralization that you had, the skarn hosted mineralization, did have some arsenic in it, if I remember correctly. Is that right?
So there was actually a couple of so there was skarn mineralization with copper, gold, and silver, and then there was some separate quartz carbonate shear zones that were almost massive arsenopyrite. So that it looked like there was multiple phases of mineralization going on through different structures. And my initial thoughts are that the almost massive arsenopyrite with low-grade gold, I think it was about between zero point 0.3 and zero point 0.6 grams that came with it in the couple of holes that we had, is a later phase because it cuts through the skarn mineralization and it looks to be very structurally controlled, and a different system to the broader skarn replacement that we were seeing in the hole.
Would it be, and I'll go back to that structurally controlled part because that's important too, I think. But is it too early to talk and think about doing some met work this year, just so you can see if the arsenic isn't too much or too prevalent in the system?
Well, so like I say, we're targeting the higher grade skarn material, which I think at the minute is separate from these arsenic rich zones,
Mhm.
which don't typically come with too much arsenic, but maybe that's something we'll look into when we find what we're looking for. But I think um, yeah, at this stage we're not going too much into the metallurgy before we get some nice holes back.
Yeah, and that makes sense. It's just metallurgy. I've been hurt by metallurgy before, I guess, and that's why I always look out for it. But you're right; it is probably too early. Let's go back to that structural part. It looks structurally complex, and potentially more importantly, at least in my again untrained eyes, it also looks structurally different from Bor and Cukaru Peki because, and if I'm reading this map correctly, the major strike slip faults responsible for their mineralization don't intersect these targets directly that you're talking about here. So what's the thesis on the structure here?
So I've got a really nice section. Yeah, so this is a cross section through the bore zone, and then we have the ophiolite to the east of us here as well. And this is our AMT data that we've superimposed on the top of this section. So this section is based on a paper from a local group that are doing a study on the TMC and the margins. So you can see these faults here. So these are extensional Cretaceous faults that formed at the time of the magmatic emplacement. So you can see Veliki Crivel here forms in this graben structure, which is where a block essentially gets dropped down during the extension. And Bor as well is on one of these large extensional faults. So this is our AMT data here, which shows a very similar response in the resistivity. And we know we have a large fault in this valley here, which lines up with the AMT data very nicely. And then we also have mapped in another fault in this direction, which confused us for a little while, but now in the context with the grabens, it makes sense. And we have essentially a repeating extensional fault system that's connected directly into the TMC along here. So if I just move this out of the way quickly, so you can see the limestone here, and then our other Western mag target falls directly on this graben structure as well. The deep intrusives come up here. They're not mapped into this section because no one has a good sense on where they really are in the Timok region. The volcanics and phase one outcrop at surface, which is a good indication, but they could quite as easily be buried in subvolcanic down here, and essentially bleeding into the structure and then coming up these extensional faults where we get opening, form good conduits for mineralizing fluids and porphyry forming intrusives.
Right. So is this geologically, is this the same magmatic plumbing system as a Cukaru Peki, for example? Is that how you see it now?
So it's easier to talk about Bohr and Veliky Krivel here because we're directly on the same section. As you go further down, there's another fault that cuts Cukaru Peki off and drops it down. So the structures aren't as well mapped there because it's also 600 meters under surface cover. But if I go with Bohr and Veliky Krivel for analogs, yeah, you can see the extensional faulting running through here. And it looks like we have the same system coming across into Timok East in the Paleozoic metasediments that we have on surface here and across the western portion of our target area, where we have the mag anomaly there. And the deep intrusives here that form the porphyries, there's a huge batholith that forms under the TMC, probably around here. And then you get smaller shoots that come up called cupolas, and then the mineralized fluids come off these and form the porphyry deposits.
Right.
Up these structures.
But there's nothing like there's no slip fault or another fault or anything that kind of cuts off the mineralization that is at Bohr and Veliky Krivel that would come over to your part of the package. There's nothing that could cut it off for as far as you could tell so far.
No. So all these faults strike the same way as the Bohr trend. So north-northwest. And they're just essentially extensional structures that facilitate the fluids and the intrusives to come up. The large strike slip faults in the region to the east of us, so the Cerner fault and the Timok fault. And these are the two faults that do have some lateral displacement. But like I said, they're on the east of they're to the east of our project boundary, which means Timok East, yeah, is connected into this plumbing system, essentially, which is good.
While we are at it, might as well pull up. You mentioned the geophysics earlier, and show me what more geophysics you want to do and where you want to do it.
By the way, there is a news release which will include this map. So
cool.
That should come out on Monday, I believe.
Okay, good.
Well, I mean, you can see it here. So these are the faults. I'll just quickly go across that as well. These are the faults that are controlling the mineralization mostly. So the north-northwest striking extensional faults, and you get the Bohr associated fault that runs through here, and you get the Veliky Krivel fault that runs through here, and then you get the most easterly fault that we just highlighted on the section that runs through here and here. So this is the graben in between here, linking underneath here to the same plumbing system, we hope.
Got it.
And then back into the geophysics quickly. I'll just turn the geology off. So we're going to cover this whole area essentially with a 300-meter line space grid, which comes out about 280 kilometers line length. And then, actually, I have it on here, so I'll load it up. And then this area, so we have the Western mag target, and we're going to cover with 150-meter line spacing down here. And then the skarn trend across here, we're going to do the same 150-meter line spacing. So some of the recent work that I was just talking about is essentially field work, basically traverses walking along here and collecting samples that look like they have some skarn potential. And we found those samples basically all the way along here across 3 strike kilometers. The skarn mineralization we've intercepted in the drilling and at surface is associated with magnetite. So that should hopefully light up really nicely with the mag survey, which is why we're going to cover this area with an increased grid.
So you're looking for a chargeability high or a conductive anomaly, essentially?
No, so magnetic high.
Oh, okay, a mag high. Well,
yeah, so the skarns are associated with increased magnetite content. So we've found that in the drill core with the skarns, and then over and done these projects, and most skarns around have a lot of magnetite in with them. So this obviously lights up with the mag, and that's what we're targeting with the survey across here, which should hopefully identify some nice targets that we can follow up with some drilling across here to try and vector in on a hotter zone of the skarn if it's lateral, and then also it gives some nice data vectoring into this what we think's an intrusive unit down here as well. and we have the phase 1 andesites that are associated with the porphyries at Veliki Krivel and Bor that also outcrop at surface right on top of this mag anomaly as well, which is nice.
Well, forgive my 75 IQ thinking here, but shouldn't a concealed porphyry or sulfide system show up as a chargeability high or a conductive anomaly? Is that not how it would typically go down?
Yeah, so that's another option, but so you can also identify porphyries quite nicely with magnetics. So they form, in a perfect scenario, they form a donut sort of structure where you get the magnetite destruction in the alteration in the core, and then a rim that's enriched with magnetite in the different porphyry alteration zones that zone outwards. So that's what we're looking for essentially with the more detailed mag. And then, like I said, the skarn, we should hopefully be able to vector in on some higher temperature targets there where the magnetite accumulates in large quantities.
Right. Are you going to be doing an inversion model before the next round of drilling or something like that?
So with the magnetics, you essentially just get the so you get 4 different filters of the data, but it essentially doesn't give you much depth information. You get a 1 VD and some derivatives that do suggest the depth, but essentially gives you the targets that you can look for on surface. And then you follow that up with the data we already have, which is the AMT, and then hopefully another line of AMT that will cut across that target as well, which will then give us the depth, so it'll give us the resistivity and conductivity signature of that body, which we can then use for more specific detailed drill targeting.
Right. Okay, so that's why the AMT, because you want to go deeper essentially with the geophysics.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Well, so when all is said and done here with the next drill program, what would you consider success? What are your sort of go or no-go thresholds?
So we want to see higher temperature alteration and some more porphyry style veining with higher copper content and more consistent grades in copper and gold that shows that we're vectoring in closer towards the center, if not hitting the actual center of the porphyry. And then, I mean, obviously, you asked me, what do we want from the next drill program? We want to make a major discovery of a porphyry.
Sure.
If we don't do that in the first hole, it would be a success from the first hole to move into a higher temperature zone with higher copper grades, higher gold grades, and more typical alteration, showing that we're moving in towards the porphyry center. And if not that, we're moving in towards the center of the skarn and the higher potential area of that.
Well, when I ask you what do you want to see, I'm thinking more from the perspective of width and grade. I mean, are we talking about 50 meters of 0.5% copper? It doesn't have to be above 1%. What is it? What's the profile, the grade by width?
So that's, I mean, all going well and perfect. If we hit a deposit like Cukaru Peki, Bor, Veliki Krivel, so they're low grade porphyry deposits in general with high grade, high sulfidation deposits on top, and then some with skarn flanks as well. So drilling into the main porphyry, I mean, I think Cukaru Peki is about the actual porphyry zone of that is around 0.5% copper at
Well, the lowest zone is
0.86%
copper, and then the upper zone goes up to, I mean, let's call it the average around 3, but there's still some high grade copper. So I think you're setting us a little bit here to say things that we may regret one day, but I think what we would certainly be pleased anything around 1 and above, between 1 and 3. I mean that's already in a modern world, in a what we call a good copper deposit, that's already very, very rich. So but I think this is now we're getting into a zone that I don't feel comfortable solely for the disclosure reasons, and one day somebody may dig out this recording and say, well, you promised us 3% copper, which we are definitely not promising, not even one.
Well, if someone's promising anything in geology, then that's kind of how you know that they have no idea what they're doing or talking about. So that is absolutely fair. And do you know how long it took them to discover Cukaru Peki? Because I think that there's kind of an expectation, I think, with retail investors that you have to make a discovery in the first drill program, and the vast majority of discoveries don't happen in the first or the second or the third program. So, any idea historically how long it took them?
I'm so glad you're asking this question, because I went and traced back that particular, the question you just asked. And the discovery hole was made in 2012. So that's the hole that they made, which really, raised everybody's eyebrows and everybody got excited. And I know that as a fact, because I happened to be at the time with a bunch of Canadian, Toronto-based mining analysts, and we were flying to northern Quebec for the mine sites, and it was a small plane, and everybody was speaking about Serbia, and I got so excited, because until that moment hardly anybody knew where Serbia was. So then if you take 2012 as a year when the discovery hole was made, and then you can look on both sides of the time horizon. You can look from the moment reservoir staked the ground, or they took a ground from what is today known as EMX royalties. And I think it probably took them a good 5 years, if not a little bit more, to come to that discovery hole. And it's a very interesting story, which, I don't know if it's fully true, but certainly I heard it from a number of geologists who worked in the team, that they've been around 2 times drilling across the whole property, and they came back to the first hole ever drilled, which became a discovery hole. It's just that that second round they went deeper. That is, I don't know if it's true, but it just shows the time frame between the initial exploration and everything what we're doing now, and the discovery hole is, definitely multiple of years. In those days, let's say maybe they didn't have all the knowledge that we have today. We definitely benefit from a lot of knowledge that reservoir minerals gained, certainly in the deeper geophysics and deploying more of geophysics. That's I think we do have a benefit of the hindsight. And then you can take from the discovery hole until the further, sale and further kind of outlining the deposit. It took another, 4 years. So it's not something that, clearly, I'm not saying this is an excuse, and I none of us, and we would like to see it for so long, because, we live in a different time. The expectations are shorter time frame. People, and we also have more tools, including all kind of artificial intelligence and things that we have more in our toolkit than what they had. So I don't think, I wouldn't really like to suggest that it will take us between 5 and 7 years to not only discover but also to outline. Absolutely not. But if we were to do it in a year, as Jake and I, we often joke about it, we would go into Hall of Fame, because it does take time to make these type of discoveries. So I would say that, market and ourselves, we should all give us a little bit of time, and, certainly, talk about a couple of years, if not 3 to 4 years.
How much money do you need for this next step on that 3 to 4 year journey?
On a 3 to 4 year journey, and that's again drawing the parallel, or taking from the history and the reservoir and Neptune, even before Neptune got involved, Reservoir had a joint venture partner in a Freeport. So officially, Cukaru Peki wasn't only found by Reservoir, it was also found by the Freeport. So we do know that, and these are expensive endeavors, especially more deeper you go, that our capital structure and everything you summarized at the opening remarks, we wouldn't be able to, even if the money is there, it's going to be very prohibitive, expensive, dilutive to aspire to make that discovery entirely on our own. And that's where, the likes of BHP or other majors will come into play as long as they can see that we're on the right track.
So what you're hinting at essentially here is you're more in favor of asset level raises as opposed to equity level raises. Like you want to do a JV.
Well, I don't want to sound like I want to do a JV, because I'm a shareholder and I'm somebody who, made money, lost money in the markets, and I know the beauty and the danger of the public markets. Clearly, I would like to advance this as a CEO as much as we can in our own right, so that we do see a good, and we offer to our shareholders a good appreciation in a share price. However, there will be a time that one will have to consider the asset level investment, because the numbers won't work. I mean, it's the kind of a template that juniors are following increasingly.
What would, hypothetically, forward looking and all that, what would a good deal look like for you, and how much upside are you, or would you be ready to give away here? I mean, is it if I came tomorrow, and again, you can see I'm a man of hypotheticals apparently today at least, but if I came tomorrow with a 75% proposition, I give you an earning agreement, but it's me earning into 75% of the asset. Is that something you say yes to, or how much do you want to give away?
Well, it's a good question. It's an academic question. It's a matter of debate. Depends obviously at which point we are. We have a very good template in our neighbor, Mindoro, which has quite a number of these joint ventures, and you can see pretty much everything. I think from 80, 20, 75, 25 to even closer to 50. I think depends really how far we get in our own journey. So clearly, more we have meets and more we can demonstrate that we have a serious potential, we will be able to keep the bigger portion of the pie. Having said that, in most of these deals, there's fairly quickly you come to the point that free carry is not free carry anymore, and then you end up still needing to raise the money for your part. So it's a balancing act. I always have my shareholders, and I'm one of those, in heart and in mind, to deliver the best potential for that uplift in the share price that all people put money in. And I don't think I can tell you more, because we really don't know how big this could be or small, and that will determine the ratio of and how early we may entertain somebody coming in.
I'll get back to it here in a second, but it's just something that I forgot to ask at the beginning that I typically do ask. What is your average cost of the shares that you own right now? Because you said it's a combination of founder shares and all that. Yeah, what's the average cost of the shares that you own?
Well, that's a good question. I would have to calculate, especially given that I subscribed personally, and quite a few of the private investors subscribed at 15 cents.
What do you think it's? I don't need an exact number really, but I'm thinking, is it higher than what the price is right now?
Yes, I think it's somewhere between here and 8 cents. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
But I would really have to calculate. I honestly don't know, but I do know that most of our, including ourselves, shareholders who put money in the private company before we went public, we did all our raises at 10 and 15.
Right. That's fine, and that's kind of what I'm looking for there as an answer. But and I kind of interrupted the flow here, so let's maybe try and jump back on it again, because that was an interesting part of the conversation, was if we can get this to a point where we know more about the deposit, then maybe we can get a better deal. How far can you get the assets with the $800,000 that you have right now?
Clearly not far. We could stretch it, and that would be quite a stretch, but still we could stretch and drill another hole. So sooner or later, and obviously our plan is to it's not an easy one, but yes, our plan is to go back drilling, have a good hole along the lines that we described earlier, what would make a good hole, so that we can go back to the market and raise more money to then have a much deeper or more comprehensive drill campaign.
Right. Timing wise, you're thinking this summer, June, July, August, or what are you thinking?
Yeah, definitely somewhere between June, July. August is, as we all know, a bit of a holiday month. But clearly that will be driven by the share price and what we can do. I do speak to most of, not all of my shareholders every day, but quite a few are engaged with me, and we all agree that clearly at these levels, and we do need to do something about the share price, and hopefully, things will improve globally, not just in terms of our own performance, but also, we've just been through a very, very drastic sell-off across the market because of the tariffs and the situation that's been now pulled back. So let's hope market goes back. But yeah, I mean, we do not intend to raise money at these levels for sure.
How are drilling costs? What are you paying per meter drilled?
We have an official cost and that's not only official, that's what we pay. It's 110 euros per meter. However, I do have to put a disclaimer that is really only a drilling cost. There are additional costs, not just obviously for sampling and assaying, but also, there is a cost of land access and mobilization, etc. So I would say all in, our cost is closer to 150
Okay, euro
per
that
meter.
is. Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
which is euro, US dollars. Not huge difference.
How's permitting for the work that you want to do? Is everything permitted? Is social license too? Is everyone in the region happy with you being there?
Yes, the answer is yes. I think the first talking about general permitting, it's actually very good situation in Serbia. When you're applying for your license, your mineral exploration license, you apply for 3 years. You need to put a program. You need to present to the government, to the ministry, what you're planning to do. And everything that you present is automatically permitted. I mean, not automatically, obviously, they consider it all. But if you put drilling in advance, so at the point of your first application, that means you have your drill permit. So we have, and everybody does that. It's not only us. Everybody does include some drilling in the first 3-year program, which means we have all the permits. So for this particular, campaign, we didn't need any additional permits from the government or the ministry. The only thing that we needed is the agreement with the landowners. The landowners are very happy to have us. We do pay the access. We do pay for the drill pads. And we are good corporate citizen. We engage with them. You asked me earlier, da li pričam srpski. Moj srpski puno pomaže. My Serbian helps a lot because I actually do communicate with them on one-on-one. And sometimes people say, well, you shouldn't be so involved in everything, but I have to, but also I like it. It's kind of going back to my roots. And I think that's very much appreciated. And as Jake mentioned earlier, we do have now full-time permanent team. And that also helps because they meet, they drive around and they meet, they stop them, they ask them how it's going, etc. So it's a growing relation. It doesn't, obviously, it's not, you don't build these relations overnight, but we have been in that particular village, which is only one village. As we move across our project, we will have to do this multiple times, which means multiple drinking kaffa and rakia and the rest. But nevertheless, I do it really with my full heart, and I think that is recognized by the community.
I hope it's more kaffa than it is rakia, but it's probably kind of a mix of both. And also, non ti ho chiesto se parli italiano.
Ah sì, sì, parlo in italiano, anche in italiano, sì. Infatti adesso sono in Italia qua.
I learned a little bit of Italian just to go with my first name because people always ask me, Antonio, you should speak a little bit of Italian. That's only why I do it. But I want to talk about Novo Tlamino. We talked mostly about TMOC, and that's kind of where I personally, and it's just an opinion, so to discard it or take it with a grain of salt. But that's personally where I see the upside. Novo Tlamino already has a resource on it, though. Are you doing something there this year? What's the story behind it? What are your goals and aspiration for this project? Just tell me more about it.
So I'll start again, and Jake can sort of take over, because Novo Tlamino is a lot more than barrier. But I just wanted to step back few steps, kind of go a little bit in history. And in particular, as I was listening to your opening remarks and when you were going around our financials, and I thought, oh my God, will I actually allow this interview to go out or not? So we did acquire Medgold and Novo Tlamino, and in the process, we did incur the debt. That debt, as you will see in our new financials, as a part of the last fundraise, we had to really tidy up a lot of debt. So when you spoke about 1.2 million on the books, that's gone. We still have a long-term debt, which is closer to $500,000, and that will be, as I say, shown in our new financials coming up soon. So we did acquire Medgold for two reasons: one, going to the market, achieving public listing, but also for the barrier deposit and the outside the area around barrier, which we still feel is hugely promising, hugely prospective. In particular, two targets that we one is called Karamanitsa, and that's where we will be spending time this year, and also another target which is called Jub. So barrier is the smaller deposit or inferred resource. It's not even a deposit. It's 670,000 ounces of gold equivalent. It's mainly gold. It's gold and silver, and gold is, anything between average is 2.5 grams. I know you will allude, because you clearly know your metallurgy and you like to spend time on metallurgy. It's not your cleanest ore. There is a quite high presence of arsenic, which it doesn't kill the project, because the previous owner, they did also PA, and far from project not being economic, and that PA was done at the 1,500 gold and $16 silver, and it was still economic. However, we are aware of the metallurgical issues. So it's effectively refractory ore. We are doing part of different studies. We are conducting, or have commissioned people to do it. We're also looking into solutions for the better solution to effectively increase the recovery of this refractory ore, which may involve including some very modern technologies and the bioleaching, etc. So we are still far from the development, and I don't think we would ever even consider embarking on developing 670,000 ounces, which is in inferred, which means in order to get a mining license, you still need to upgrade it to a measured and indicated, which would probably lose. So it's still a tiny, small deposit. However, between the Karamanitsa, which is a next door, very near target, where we are actually going to start some work there after Easter, and between the targets that even the previous owner already knew that they were. If you read the PEA and if you speak to the and by the way, Thomas Sand, who is our senior geologist, he's somebody who also worked on the for Medgold, and he worked on that project. So we have that continuation of the knowledge and of the work. So even in those days when Fortuna Silver was the earning in partner, even in those days they could see potentially growing to 1 million ounces, but not more. So we know that the worst case scenario is the potentially 1 million ounces, and then plus resolving the metallurgy. So that's what barrier is today. However, as I say, there are a number of targets around that we think we can considerably increase the resource not necessarily only in Barrier, but including the targets like Karamanitsa and Jub. Given where the gold is, and 3,000 plus, it's obviously not easy for us, given that all the money we either raised or we got through BHP XPLOR, none of that is assigned to Novo Tlamino, so it's a bit of a challenge. So we can do very low impact, kind of a cheap and cheerful work. But the hope is when we get ready for the next fundraise, we will then be also able to present a new exploration model, a new case for Novo Tlamino, so that portion of the money that we will be raising will be directed into the Novo Tlamino as well.
Why not sell it or option it and then put all the money into TMOC?
Well, that's always a backup option. I always call that, and we are getting closer to that thinking, because clearly until TMOC East would sort of set the roots and be standalone project that would require all of our attention as a management, and also would be sufficient to drive the market and the share price and the rest. TMOC East, Novo Tlamino as the new enlarged project. So again, this is very important to distinguish. This is not only what we've acquired, this is what we are enlarged by adding additional ground and additional historic results to the Novo Tlamino, was a backup. At the same time, with the gold 3,000, do you really want to sell the kind of a more advanced project? I mean, we do get approaches, so that's something that pretty much everybody know, and because apparently there are not many projects at this stage, so we do get approaches, and we are open. It's not absolutely no, we are not going to sell it. We don't need to sell it. We don't have any capital expenditure needs. We are fully compliant with the government, and because of all the historic work that has been done. So there is no rush and pressure to sell it. So, clearly if there is an option or opportunity that we cannot refuse, we will seriously consider it. But right now, I think that the thinking on the board and between us is to certainly, advance it a little bit more before we decide what to do with it.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of value we can still add relatively easily and cheaply at Karamanitsa especially, and at Barrier. So Barrier, the resource is bound to the south with a big post-mineral fault, and there's been one hole to the south of that fault that hit a narrow interval of gold, and not much other exploration apart from that around the actual resource. So we've recently, the past couple of months, done a structural study, which we're still putting together and need to do a little bit of follow-up field work to sort of confirm the interpretations and tweak them a little bit. And that's at Barrier in between Liska at the bottom of the hill and Barrier up at the top. So trying to find the southern extension of the resource that's been offset by the post-mineral fault. And then up at Karamanitsa, we have a 2 by 3 kilometer really strong gold anomaly in the soils, and no one's really figured out where the source of that's come from. So the work we're going to be doing up there after Easter, like Elena said, we're going to basically try and pull apart the geochemistry to see what kind of deposit type we're definitely looking for up there, and then takes some select samples for some petrology and try and get to the bottom of where that anomalism in the soils is coming from and where can that lead us to target with some more holes down the line. But there's a lot we can do there for relatively low cost and low man hours that can add some real value, I think.
As it is with most things, when someone asks you, hey, do you want to sell it? I suppose the answer almost always is, well, depends on how much money you want to pay for it. Is there that's what I'm trying to figure out here for myself. Like, is this something, how much is this project worth? And are there comparisons to a deal that maybe happened, I don't know, nearby or in a similar system or something that I could kind of hang my hat on and be like, okay, by the word, like in the worst case scenario, that's what this project is worth. And that's the value that it adds to the company.
So, yeah, it's a very good question. Obviously, we do have PA that was produced in 2021. at a significantly lower prices of gold and silver. Obviously, the cost was lower as well. So this pre-tax 100 million thereabouts US dollars NPV was, not that number any longer. It's not just double or triple because cost has gone up as well. We have been working with the group to update the numbers. It's somewhere probably around 170 million suggested. Would anybody pay that money? No, absolutely not. There are certain, sort of rules that when you have an inferred in PA on inferred resource, do you get 10-20% of that NPV? Maybe. There was a recent acquisition, which is not fully completed, but that's not too far from us, which is in Bulgaria. I think the Velocity Minerals, they made they signed the deal, and I think they got partial payment for it, which was quite a nice figure. I think it was coming closer to 30 or 50 million. Clearly, if somebody would offer us that level of money, we wouldn't think. Yes, we would very happily sit around the table and discuss it. But as I say, I mean, today we have mainly, companies which are listed on ASX, predominantly looking for an asset to revamp the company. That is not something we necessarily want to consider because, what do I do with the share, junior company shares? So, and at the same time, I really think there is more for us to do. I mean, there's really more for us to do to not only update the PA in terms of just plugging in the new commodity price and the new cost price, but also, advancing Karamanitsa, looking into Bari and this potentially new exploration model. We are potentially, I haven't still signed it, we are potentially going to do a test for the bioleaching as long as we can provide enough material. So there are things that we, at a very limited, low cost, we can do to push that decision further and hopefully add more value so that we can, if it comes to that, we can sell it for a meaningful number.
Right. I appreciate that update because I haven't paid too much attention to Novo Tlamino, so it's good to have that update there. What else have we not talked about? Oh, G&A, I mentioned at the beginning, it was about $110,000 a month over the last reported 9-month period. Is that where you think G&A is going to stay? Can you lower it if you had to, or how do you
we
think
are
about
looking to lower it. We did kind of really went quite aggressive on the employment in Serbia. Clearly there we have to, these are all full-time employees and with a lot of, I mean, everybody costs 60% more because of the taxes and the social security, etc. It's it's something that I always wanted to do, to have a very strong, big local team for everything, for the knowledge transfer, for the education and just being a good corporate citizen and employer in the region. We may have to scale back that, not so much letting people go, but maybe putting them on a half time. But yeah, I mean, we are all every day, and that's my job, and I know I'm not very popular for that. I do look into ways how we can cut G&A and anything that is. And sadly, investor relation had to go, and these type of things, which are equally important, but we do live in times of uncertainty, and we're looking to cut the costs all the time. Yeah.
Well, you hired a new IR manager not so long ago. Is it, you said is it him that he had to go, or what does that mean?
Yeah, I have. Unfortunately, yes, we had to, and I know some people don't necessarily want to see IR manager go first, because clearly this is a very important role, and communication with the market and the telling the message and telling the story. But Yeah, I think that it will come back to me again. So yeah, that one job is closed. Yeah.
What are you doing for marketing? What are you planning? I mean, you were at PDC, so is it mostly a mixture of conference and online? I know you did a couple of interviews that I saw last year, I think, or not too far. So what are you planning?
I think what as a junior, as a small company, I feel it's a better dollar spent by talking to people like you and being more on these interviews. Often they are paid interviews, as you know. But I think that is giving us more penetration and more kind of ability to spread our word and wings in the market than having an in-house IR person, because then ultimately you're relying on that person, book and his or her contacts. So we will continue interviews like what we're doing just right now with you. We are planning to start our internal investor webinars. So I think the first one is scheduled for the 30th of April, where we will utilize all our shareholders and my own contacts, and just kind of do it internally. Keep all our shareholders and potential investors up to date. Conferences, yeah, I mean, we did a couple. I think it's always a mixed bag of what you achieve and what you don't achieve. I think we'll probably scale back on that one and just rely more on the interviews, on the cyber presence, on this social media, publications, written interviews, in addition to kind of live interviews, and yeah, so a mixture of things.
I'm noticing the clock over there, and I see that I've taken more of your time than what you had initially promised me. So let's maybe work toward wrapping up, and hopefully we can pick it up soon, sometime in the future when you know more about exactly what you're going to be drilling and all that. But what am I forgetting to ask you here for the first interview? What did you come here hoping to talk about that I failed to bring up?
No, this was more than I bargained for, not just in time, but also in terms of the very direct and questions. So I hope we answered everything, even some that might not be very comfortable. But yeah, I think I'm perfectly satisfied with everything we talked.
Thanks. Jake, anything you want to add here at the end?
No. So, like I said, briefly what we're doing, and Tlamino, I covered that. And then down at TMOC this month, so we're looking to sign the contract for the ground mag this week, and then the petrology to vector in using the TEMA, and then hopefully get some nice targets from the mag, and then we'll know, hopefully know where our best drill targets are moving off the back of that.
Right. I'm sure there's stuff that I've missed in here, and so for people listening and watching, let me know what I've missed, and hopefully I'll get to ask those questions at a later date in the next interview. But Elena and Jake, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks.
Well, thank you, Antonio, for having us.
And as always, thanks to everyone for watching Resource Talks. I have a couple of more things to say, though. The fact that this company was interviewed here today does not mean that they're necessarily a good or a bad company. I'm not here to endorse nor attack anyone. I am simply here to ask some questions. If you find that I have failed in asking a question that you would have liked to hear an answer to, which will happen as I'm not an experienced interviewer, please let me know, and I will try to correct that mistake in a future interview. As mentioned at the beginning, please understand that mineral exploration and development is an extremely risky business. Losing money is the norm and should be the expectation. This is a very complex sector, and the performance of individual companies typically depends on many different moving particles, including company-specific factors like geology, financing ability, and many others, really, as well as particles that are outside of the company's control, like geopolitics, macroeconomics, commodity prices, and many more, most of which are nearly impossible to fully understand. Moreover, these companies that typically get interviewed on Resource Talks are in the pre-revenue stage, which means they rely on the public markets for the financing of their operations, which could result in shareholder dilution. Furthermore, as a general rule of thumb, you'll be better off understanding that all company communications online, albeit this interview or their website and their presentation and their social media accounts, or even the social media accounts which you thought were your friends and then told you about a stock, everything really that these companies do is intended as marketing. And although I do not make buy or sell recommendations because there is a clear conflict of interest given the nature of my business, many out there do. And you should be aware of that inherent bias, and you should be careful out there. That bias is not always going to be clearly disclosed with everyone out there. So it is safer for you anytime you're watching any type of company specific content to approach it with a dose of skepticism and assume that the party telling you about it is biased in at least some shape or form, because there will always be a bias, again, albeit clear or not. So always ask yourself what the incentive of your counterparty is and never rely on them regardless of their incentives, but instead double check if what they're saying is true, again, by using setterplus.ca. The fact that I have no idea what I'm doing should already be clear to you at this point. I am not saying this to make jokes or laugh with myself. I just simply do not have a long enough track record of consistent investment profits. So I should under no circumstances be considered an authority on anything. Again, although this may sound amusing to you, believe me, it is not amusing, and it is not intended as a joke. I'm simply pointing out a fact and warning you not to rely on anything I do or say. Unfortunately, at least to my understanding, nobody out there has any special abilities. The CEOs do not possess any superior knowledge, and they cannot know about what will go up, what will go down, or what will go in circles. Some people even believe that to be rule number one on Wall Street. Nobody really knows. None of us know whether any of the company's activities will result in a success, again, given that we're talking about high-risk activities where most of the times it ends in failure. Also, unfortunately, try as I may, I won't always catch all red flags or all challenges with the companies. So even if I did ask a few tough questions in here, don't rely on this being all of the tough questions. Again, these are complicated startups with many moving parts, and I am conflicted given the nature of this business. Therefore, I cannot guarantee the quality of anything presented in this video, and you cannot hold me responsible for any losses or damages stemming from the way you decide to use this interview. Viewers, listeners, and readers acknowledge and agree that the information presented herein did not constitute a solicitation or an offer to buy or sell any security or investment or to participate in any trading strategy. Resource Talks and all parties involved in the management of the business strictly disclaim any and all liability for losses and or damages, whether direct, indirect, special, or consequential, or other consequences, however so caused, arising out of any use or reproduction of the content published by Resource Talks or any decision made or action taken in reliance upon it. By consuming this content, all consumers vow to release Resource Talks and all parties involved in the management of the business from all claims, proceedings, or consequences. This is all to say, I know it's a lot of lawyer talk, but this is all to say that you shouldn't blindly trust me or anybody on the internet, and you should do your own research. Once again, social media is meant for entertainment. It is setterplus.ca where you do your research. That's where you'll find the company's official filings, and I encourage you to read and analyze the Management Information Circular, the financial statements, the Management Discussion and Analysis, and whenever available, the NI 43-101 technical documents. If you don't understand everything in those documents, the chances of you losing money are even higher than they normally are in this space. And as mentioned earlier, the chances of even the best analysts in this sector losing money are extremely high, since this is venture capital and it is not for everybody. I'll leave you with one of Charlie Munger's quotes, which I wish I had listened to more often earlier on, which says, quote, "If you don't understand it, don't do it."